Hello, welcome everybody to a peer-to-peer interview with Annelise Forster and Elisa García de la Huerta. We will have just a spontaneous and quite free talk between us. I'm Laura Olea, Assistant Curator at GlogauAIR, Artist in Residency Program. This has been a really interesting 3 months, of course, as everyone knows, with the global pandemic around the globe has been really difficult to continue with our normal program in GlogauAIR in Berlin. So for this occasion, we had to transform our program to a virtual and digital environment to keep together our residents, but also keep working on our art creation, but also create a community and connect with Berlin from around the globe. So I think we have really good examples with Annelise Forster from Australia and Elisa García de la Huerta from Chile. They have a really interesting works, and both of them relate somehow with music, with sound, and also movement. So we will discuss a little bit about it during this peer-to-peer interview. So let's start. Maybe you can start with Annelise. Maybe you can start telling a little bit about your work. How do you relate to that? And also this experience in GlogauAIR these 3 months.
Yeah. Hi, so I'm Annelise Forster. I'm from Adelaide, Australia. So obviously I've been in Australia for the last 3 months. Obviously been a weird time, as much as it has for everyone else. But it's been really cool being able to do this virtually and connect with everyone and meet people from all around the world. Like Elisa's in Chile, I'm in Australia, and we're still able to do this, which has been cool. So my project and a lot of my work is based around sound, but particularly music, and looking at how that affects people, particularly on an emotional state, and kind of expressing that mainly through painting, but starting to move through movement as well, and using that as a visual representation of how you experience music, basically. Yeah.
Elisa, what can you tell us about your work and also your relationship with this digital program at GlogauAIR?
Hi, my name is Elisa. I'm from Chile. I have lived abroad for almost 12 years, so I'm relocating in my country, and this has been a challenge to do the residency online, but also a good opportunity to explore. I'm mostly interested in portraying our relationship with nature and how technology affects our capacity for intimacy. And yeah. And I explore that with photography and various medias, but now mainly sound, performance, and analog photography.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both of you for your presentation and introduction. I really appreciate this encounter because I think it explains really well the methodology that we have been following during these 3 months in the program, that we try to create spaces to discuss about our work and how to develop the projects. Right now, people can check it in the virtual open studios at glogauair.net. And you can check the work by Elisa and Annelise. Maybe we can start there. How do you think you have some similarities or common areas in your work, and the people can? Do you think people could appreciate it that in the virtual open studios that we have currently in the website?
I think it's been interesting how we both, on paper, we have a lot of similar things in our art practices, but it, particularly seeing it in the exhibition, it is totally different approaches. That's been really interesting to follow and talk about through the different meetings. And that's what I'm excited to talk about today as well. But it's been interesting, I think, particularly for myself, doing it virtually rather than being able to physically present work kind of pushed me almost to experiment more with like sound and video art versus keeping it kind of the end result and bodies of work for me being more about a physical painting, but kind of taking it into a realm where it's like, oh, maybe I'll focus on how it's going to sound, or like having that element be more prominent in my work. Versus it was really cool seeing Elisa's work and that performance that you did on the opening night, and having it be just such a audio experience was really cool.
What do you think, Elisa?
Yeah, I really enjoy seeing everybody's final work in the website, and also just kind of how the whole process got me more interested in everybody's work, and then see how they presented, considering the situation. Especially Annelise, I was surprised how there was that sort of deliberate decision to show movement by itself rather than the painting as the result, and the during the residency, I saw how you were talking about music and the process, and I thought it was really interesting how that became super prominent and expressive. So I am curious, like, how did you make those decisions, and what was the benefit you got from it?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting, the whole process. I think deciding to focus on the movement came later on, particularly after having a meeting with Lara. Having done that first video where it was kind of the mixture of the movement and painting, it's kind of where I sat more comfortably. But then having that discussion of whether it would be more powerful to separate the two. And I think I kind of went against that idea to begin with, but then it became more and more interesting separating the two elements and breaking down of like what's actually more important to it. And I was a bit nervous to do it initially, but I actually found I really enjoyed doing the movement more, and that felt more natural in a way. So first kind of time kind of doing something like that, but it was totally different experience, particularly doing it blindfolded as well. Again, I kind of just decided to do that as I was filming, because it became so much more, rather than being in my head worrying about everything, it was very much more focused on exactly how the music was affecting me in that moment, and became much more organic, which is really interesting. Yeah, because all my art is very process driven, so it was all it's kind of been an interesting journey throughout the 3 months, breaking that down into almost more simplified segments, but I think that turned out to be more powerful than what initially I thought it would. But like talking about process and stuff, I really wanted to ask you, with when you're creating sounds, because you talk about your connection with nature and connecting that with our human experience as well, are you kind of more inspired by different surroundings, or like when you're creating your sound works, do you have specific sounds in your mind before you make them, or is it kind of just happens quite naturally? Like, I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, I mentioned Laura one time. I kind of see the process as painting. It's like collaging. Mostly, I just have my recorder, and I would go and record. Sometimes I'm just in bed and starts raining, and I will go and record 2 minutes, or especially the piece you find in the show is mostly I would go on walks mostly every day to similar locations, but the sounds I search for, they're pretty specific. Mostly there's a certain strong resonance, let's say in cliffs or pipes. And I'm sometimes walk by, and then I'm kind of stop, and I really enjoy the sound, and then I want to record, let's say, and some of those sounds then I would play around in the computer, and I will manipulate them to really get what it feels good, or something that I can do something with. But it's kind of a slow process. I just collect, and then I edit some of them, and then slowly start building up the track on software. But like just to mention, like there is like a very low sound bass, kind of like, and just like walking on this nature path that I used to walk when I was really young. So it's been kind of revisiting places that I really loved when I was a child, and then I find like pipes, and I touch them, and then they create sounds. And so a lot of also those sounds I make, they it's like my interaction with the environment, like touching stones or touching leaves, or creating little sounds in the pipes, or yeah. I also wonder, I also wondered, I thought it was interesting, the juxtaposition of the music versus the poetry, and I thought, is this something you found? Is this something, are you reading the poetry? Who is this voice? And I wonder, how did you make the choice? And yeah, I'm curious about that.
So with deciding to, I decided to break it into kind of like a lyrics and words section, and then have the music separate, just to see if what the difference was and how I reacted. So a bit more of an experiment to see if like I was more responsive to the actual sound of the instruments, or whether it was more kind of the lyrics that get me. And it was really interesting, because it felt very different for each of them. For the poetry though, I decided rather than just having someone spoken words or getting someone to sing, it would kind of be interesting to have some sort of rhythm with the way that she performed the poem, but also seeing if whether it was actually the words that she spoke that kind of influenced how I moved. I actually got a friend, one of my friends, her name's Rasheen. She does spoken poetry quite often, has been doing it for a few years. I just love her work. So I asked her to come and do it kind of as a favor. But for the music one, I chose the piece and I listened to it for a few times beforehand, and then in the video it's completely improvised. But for the spoken poetry piece, I asked her not to tell me what she was doing beforehand, keep it completely surprised, so it's just a very initial reaction in the moment. And it was kind of nerve-wracking doing that, but it felt, I don't know, it felt more authentic, kind of having it again, very initial, what's going on, like I'm hearing it for the first time, my body's experiencing it for the first time, so it's the first time I'm moving to it. And it was really cool kind of doing that, and I'd actually really love to do that with music next time as well, have someone kind of pick something for me to see what happens with that, because I find I tend to go for the pieces of music particularly that kind of resonate with me, or like I've got some sort of previous connection with. I would love to do more with like spoken poetry or other pieces of music that are completely foreign to me and see what happens with that. Yeah, but did you find, trying to ask people this as well, like when watching the difference, do you find that you connect more with the lyrics, or do you tend to connect more with like actual sounds, particularly given that's so big in your practice? Like, yeah, as onlooker, like what connects with you more?
One second. Like a contrast of expression, and also I find that language and words are normally they respond to a different part of the brain. So so it feels like I'm feeling things with my body while I'm seeing you move, and then I am kind of reasoning something with the words. On the other hand, just particularly to me, for me was difficult to learn to read, and poetry has always been challenging, especially with a second language. Yes. So it's just interesting to like try to understand the meaning of the poetry, and then on the other hand have the feelings or the interpretation of movement. I definitely found I like the difference, the subtlety that came with the poetry, and the more expressive with the music. And yeah, like it brought up a lot of emotion. I was not expecting something to be so kind of poignant right on. I really like that, and I also, it gave me a whole different dimension of your of yourself. Just you know, like I just saw you moving, and I was like, oh, I would be super happy to be dancing next to you in a party.
Love that. That's so cool. When you do your sound work, how do you feel when you're creating the work? Does it kind of trigger different things emotionally for you? Has it become more kind of a more logical, I need to do this, this, and this, or like, what's the process for you?
It's a bit like very intuitive and kind of like a bit chaotic, like mixing colors and painting. But and then I just listen and slowly polish, and normally that part of the work is let's say normally I have my computer on like the lowest brightness, and normally is super dark, so I can just feel the music. How does it feel? So I just like to bring up things kind of like a wave, or like a momentum, like when I see a very the more I notice during the quarantine, I've been watching so many movies that I love, almost revisiting films that I that really inspire me in a certain time, and and the more I see that I always been so inspired by film soundtracks. I guess that's where my love for ambient music comes from. And so it's like it's that when you see a really good scene in a film, normally like let's say like a big frame with landscape, or like a really close up shot of a face that is crying, and then the music helps you to break emotion.
Yeah, it's so powerful the way it does it. I think that's why I love doing work around this, because it's just like you're saying, it's like you can watch the scene without music, and then with it just adds this whole other layer of like emotion that comes with it, and just gets you so much more involved. It's so cool. Yeah,
I think it's very
sorry.
I think it's very interesting, and is one of the things that I admire most of two of you is the openness and honesty about working with emotions, and it's not so usual in contemporary art, and the honesty and straightforward of your work. Like, I work with emotions, I work with music because it's a tool for create that, but also the mix between the expressionism of your practice, being really aware of the environment. Like, for example, Elisa works with pieces of the environment, but also in the work with Annelise, in your performance, you are trying to affect that environment with your movement. And this relationship of being affected and affect the environment, like, is a dialogue and a conversation, really corporeal, right? Like, your feelings from music, and your feelings again putting out your work. And that is something that I really appreciate in a project and in development of a project, and also how you get to transform that to a digital environment that is really difficult, because it's not the same sensation or control environment when you show that work. And you think you really created because of that honesty, that you work with emotions, you work with feelings. So I think the audience can really feel the honesty in your work and the way you have been showing around in the program. So for my part, is congrats on that, because it's really difficult to be so honest because you are putting out there, but also how you choose the exact tools for explain or for transmit what you want to put out there. For example, in the case of analogic photography by Elisa, I wanted to ask you um, how has been changing the way you approach to a picture for a digital environment, or for example for from analogical experience.
You mean during the pandemic specifically, or in general? Um, I think the experience of being so static in one place, it has got me to observe so much more detail in one specific environment, especially with light, like especially with sunset. Like, let's say I see the yellow light coming through the window and seeing the shadows and the sunset, and but normally I still love the analog experience. So I like capturing things that get my attention in specific places I go, and so I guess my experience with computer and the digital medium for showing the work is more like post-production in my case. How I build a track, or how I select images, put them together, present them. So I tried. I grew up in a very analog environment. I grew up in a farm, and also I never really, I didn't even had computer class in my school. So I started, the transition with internet was me studying fine arts. And mostly I was painting, so I was sort of really late into getting interested about social media, or that was more like living in the US. And so I like finding that connection that I find when you have like a really good conversation or moment with a friend, or you're in the beach and you feel good and connected to everything. That's more the moment that I'm interested in investigating and presenting. Not sure if that answered to your question, but
yeah, of course, about the difference of the rhythm of the two techniques, like analogical versus digital photography, but in general, how we think about the process and the time that we have to think about it and keep working on that. Like, for example, during these 3 months, we talk about how you couldn't work with analogical because it takes really long, and also everything has just stopped in the global pandemic. So how we can use different techniques and different platforms just to be able to continue with our work during these difficult times.
The work I do has like a long process of becoming something. So for me, definitely, it has been a conversation around when do I use medias or analog. Now I'm mostly using analog, but for the open studio, that doesn't stop me to create work. So I kept creating analog work that mostly I probably will mature with time, and I was selecting images that were done in the past, but now they became relevant to the situation or the emotions that I'm feeling. A couple of the photos are digital, and those were shot now during the period. So that was kind of like the most performative work, and it became kind of the structure for the new work. And Annelise, I saw your artist presentation online. I really like that you mentioned Cecily Brown. I also like her work, and yeah, I was curious if you want to talk about a little bit. What is it that you like about her work, or do you want to talk a bit about your references?
Yeah, yeah, I adore her work. First, I kind of just came across her when I was while studying, and then I got to see her work in real life, and it was just an incredible experience. And I think seeing a photo of her versus being actually in the presence of her paintings is like a whole nother experience. And I kind of describe her work as it's very yummy. Like I want to go and be a part of the painting. Like I want to dive into that world, because it's just the texture that she uses and the colors and how the forms are so organic, and it's kind of like things come in and out of her paintings. I just find that really appealing. And I think I gravitate towards artists like her because I feel I love the texture in it, but also get so much emotional connection with the work, whether it's because of the concept behind it or literally just the aesthetic of it. Yeah, it's very bold, and I really love that. So kind of other artists that I love as well, kind of cliche, but like Francis Bacon, again, very bold marks, very colorful, very emotive. Yeah, it's kind of those that appeal to me, and almost like not quite recreate it, but draw on that as inspiration when I'm going to make a painting as well. Because color and form is like a really big thing for me. Whether I'm doing a complete abstract piece or something a bit more representational, it's all about the color and what emotion I can express with that mark as well. Yeah. And what about for yourself? So you're interested in her work as well?
Yeah, I really like her work, and I can relate to. I painted for many years, and I had that passion for really expressive painters like Cy Twombly, and so I can relate to that kind of like gestural, visceral, like Yves Klein, or I mean, painting is in general like it's like a main inspiration for me. Just history of painting. I guess probably painting is more of an inspiration for me than photography itself.
Yeah.
So I also can relate to that kind of like the movement of the artist, like the sort of cathartic, also like a bit cliche, but I guess Jackson Pollock was kind of like one of those artists that at least in the West started presenting the body as more like instrument to like a larger instrument.
Yeah, I think that's one of my other favorite things about painting, is that you can see, I love when you can almost feel the exact action that the artist made to get that stroke. And like using Jackson Pollock as an example, like the way he like tosses the paint, like when you're looking at the work, you can kind of feel that motion as well. I think that's why Janine Antoni as well, I loved when I saw her work for the first time. It was incredible seeing how she works and the fact that she uses just her body. And I think that was particularly a big turning point when I was like, oh, like, don't need a paintbrush. You know, throw my body on a canvas and see what happens. And like seeing how it's such a cool experience. And I literally, whenever I talk to people about this, I tell them, I'm like, literally just roll around on a canvas. It's the best thing. Like, because I don't know, personally, I find, and you probably might find this as well, like having that your body actually become part of the whole thing as well. It becomes more than just being a painting. It's like when I've used my paintings for like the showcase, to me that's like a record of the performance. It's not just the painting, it's actually you getting the movement and the emotion, you know, and I think that's so important. And particularly what I find appeals me to paintings as well. Yeah. Yeah, so with performance, like, have you always done performance art, or has that kind of become more of a more prominent thing in your work as well? Like, what's drawn you to that?
Yeah, it was a very slow process. So I was mostly doing painting and textile installation, and then I started considering photography as more like a fine arts work, and so I started doing portraiture, and that became a bit like I started noticing that what I was doing, how I was interacting with the environment, how I was using my body was the more like the interesting part to me. At the same time, I started, so I moved to the US and I started my master's, and then I started doing performances with two friends. So I started investigating kind of like performance through photography, and parallel, I jump right onto performance, but not necessarily knowing that much what it was. It was more like kind of being anarchist to the idea of being a fine artist in a studio, doing painting that kind of felt uncomfortable, and I guess it just felt really liberating to be just being super expressive. And I guess I was always performing for my family, and I always perform in the school, and I just loved it. It gives me life. So and I guess and I certainly at some point I wanted to model, and just more like teenager, but not, I was too expressive to fit in that. Like just way too much. So I guess I just kind of like channel that later on.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
I wonder, did you like study fine arts? Or I also heard you like study dance for a while, so I just wonder more detail about your background, or like how did you start incorporating your body in your art?
Yeah, so I started dancing when I was like 3. I think it's always kind of been a part of my life in some form, and it's always been the thing that's always felt most natural to do. Like, you can probably notice this whole time I don't like sitting still. Like, I just have to keep moving a lot. So yeah, for growing up until about when I started getting like late teenagers, I kind of started taking dance more seriously. And kind of in my head was planning to go and do that, and see where that could take me, but decided to go towards art instead. So I went straight from high school and did a bachelor degree in visual art, and then ended up majoring in painting. And it was kind of interesting finding the balance of being able to get some of my dance background into my painting work, and that started literally just painting dancers. I did a few pieces where I'd go and photograph them and get them to move around, and I was just so interested in the way the body moves. And it kind of started there. And then while studying, I helped out. There was a dance course in the same building as the visual arts one, which was really cool. So we got to do some collaborative stuff. So first time doing performance art with them. But performing's kind of always, kind of like you were saying, it's always just kind of felt natural, and like the thrill of being in, whether it's on a stage or in a smaller audience, it's like, it's really, even if it's nerve-wracking, it's very exciting, and yeah, it's this incredible experience. But kind of finding, it's been interesting, like particularly through this residency, like finding the difference between what's just a dance piece and what's like a performance piece as well. And something I'm still trying to find out, and something I want to look into more as well. And even if that is kind of the same thing in a way. But yeah, it's this kind of doing more of performance stuff is kind of in this context is really new to me, but I'm loving it and want to investigate it more, and keep working on that, because the idea that I can kind of combine both love of visual art and then love of dance as well and make it into something, it's really exciting. And yeah, it's been interesting to start that process, and keen to see where that can go. Yeah. But yeah. Are you at this point though in the residency, what are you kind of almost looking forward to from here on, of like, what have you kind of gotten out of the residency? I'm wondering as well, like what ideas are kind of going on for you at the moment?
I guess I'm still digesting what I put out there, and how do I feel about the work, and and also I'm curious about all the film that I took that it's going to develop, because I had limited amount of roles of film. I experimented much more with double and triple exposure. So I will finish the roll and I would roll the film back in and I would just shoot the whole film again. So I did it like 2 or 3 times, and I was much more minimal and or abstract. It really pushed me because I've been kind of relying on collaboration for shooting with friends, or and so this time it was just me and nature, and so I'm curious about what will come from that, and also it's good for me to take a little break from performing and showing work live. Laura asking the questions, I remember how was that experience, and so it was definitely challenging. I can be pretty shy around technology and the camera. Maybe sounds funny and doesn't look like, but and also especially performing. One of the main things that gives me so much reward is the conversations that happen after with people, the casual interaction, kind of like just going for dinner or dancing after, like it's just like that kind of sinking the feeling, celebrating, and like that was definitely one of the most challenging parts with the residency, to not have that moment to like kind of like you put the work out there and then it's like, okay, like it's like no feedback, like face to face.
Yeah, it's been a weird experience with that. Because same thing, because I was kind of looking forward to being able to like getting to know everyone on a more personal level, and I still hope like we can all go and do that as well. But it's like being in this virtual space, and I'm sure a lot of people have felt that in all different realms. It's almost this weird, it's like you're connecting with people but still feel kind of disconnected at the same time, and I feel like this is a weird other world that we're all kind of living in at the moment. And like, did you find, I'm talking to different creatives, like some people have found this time, like having stepped away from everything, been really productive for them, and like they've felt like they can be really creative, or some people have kind of felt like this is a good time to just take a break, or other people have kind of struggled. And like, I know for myself during this time, it took me a little bit to be able to get into a creative mindset again, to be like, okay, I need to get some work done. What am I inspired by right now? Like, did you find that you had that as well? And like you're saying, like particularly feel more collaborative and like bouncing off of people, and like I found that was a big kind of creative block for me as well. Like, was that the same for you?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. In the beginning, I was just deliberately resistant to doing the residency, to be honest. Like it felt like I wanted to be in Berlin. I wanted to be in a studio and gather people in the kitchen and just like that, you know, the living experience. And I'm like, okay, I'm alone and I have to do this online. But definitely pushed me through. And also I think it was positive in terms of having this deadlines and having to push the work. Also, it was difficult to like get into a creative mindset. And I guess I was flexible on that, and I just started kind of doing what I was feeling that I needed to do, like just going on walks, and then slowly started to record or doing analog photography. But it felt a bit selfish to like the contingency, the viruses, and also so much circulation of like, I guess social media has enhanced the this immediacy for artists to show work and create a conversation. And I guess we have to respect our process, which is different for each artist. So like, let's say, accept that, you know, some people work for like a piece that it will become something in like a year. So it's just kind of like what works for you. So yeah, it was definitely like, and also let's say just jump in the first meeting, like where like have to present our work, and it's like people I don't know, and like we didn't even had that moment where you're like sitting in a room and you just kind of like feel your way into the group, or like you just have like a laugh, or like, so then it was complete block for me, like
Yeah, it's a hard transformation and translocation of the way that we work, but also the way, of course, it can. We just started in a moment that everyone emotionally was really shocked. I think that's really important to acknowledge how you feel, not just about the work and production. You know, at some point you need to check on yourself, how are you doing, and of course this time is really difficult to be focused on something because you have inputs from crazy stuff, but also the cultural projects started to grow in a digital environment, so you had more inputs, but at the same time it's like overwhelming. So yeah, everyone is a really different situation in these months, and has been challenging. And also, of course, we understand the frustration of, because you have expectations, you have plans, and of course, even your proposals at the beginning was about that part, about collaborate with the city, about going out, and suddenly it's like, no, you cannot go to Berlin and you cannot communicate with people either. You know, like we are trying our best, but everyone was kind of shut down. So I think that is a complication too. But you did really great job. Has been a really special experiment these 3 months. Really interesting to grow alone together, like Ian's project in the showcase, like this idea of being alone in your own space, but also having some kind of line of communication with another experience and another ways to do things. So I would like to propose you to finish here, not if after finish the interview, I would like to ask the last question to Annelise about how is your next, how do you think about following or keep working, and after we have been we have shown on the virtual open studio. So now what is your mind?
Yeah, it's kind of been weird. Like I was saying, it took me a minute to get into the process of making again for a minute, but this has kind of been more giving me more drive and kind of more made me more curious for more things. So I'm kind of like, it's almost felt in a way like the residency has been a starting point for me to go off and do some other things as well. Definitely keen when everything opens up. I'm definitely planning on coming to Berlin to do a project again. But at the moment we have a art festival where I am coming up in August called Sila Festival. So it's South Australian Living Artists. So I'm working on some projects for that at the moment that I'm excited about. And actually having the opportunity to bring in some performance work with that, kind of inspired based off of the project that I've been working on. So really excited to do that, and then some other little side projects as well. But it's kind of, yeah, so during the residency, even through virtual, it's just been kind of interesting because I had planned on doing more collaborative work, but it's been more of a personal take on everything. And it's like, oh, cool. So what actually interests do I have in this? Like, how do I want to take this to the next level, and kind of give me more time at the moment. I think, yeah, taking more time at the moment to plan larger projects, what I want to do in the future. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting time to do that and kind of working on a few things, but yeah.
Yeah, it's been. So thank you so much, guys, for being here and spend this time talking about how you connect with things and asking each other questions. I don't know if you want to say goodbye or something else. I will say thank you, and just to the people who can check Virtual Open Studios at GlogauAIR.net. I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, all your help during the residency has been really a major inspiration.
Oh,
it's been a pleasure to meet you both.
Thank you. For me, it has been really
virtual.
Yeah, but really interesting to just, I don't know, like follow the process from here, because we have been doing these individual meetings more every 2 weeks, more or less, to follow how things are going. And I think that has been really powerful for me, that I was close here and focused on transform the digital program, but it has been the energy for me to say, okay, we're doing a good thing and we have to follow this path. So thank you to you. I learned so much. I hope to work together soon.
We'll have to meet up in Berlin.
Yeah, of course.
A coffee day, you know.
Yeah. So let's see each other in Berlin again. Super. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much.
Bye.